I think for everyone who considers themselves to be a filmmaker, there came a time when you fell in love with your first dream camera. For me, I think the camera that I first fell in love with, in fact, the camera that I know I first fell in love with was the Red Cinema camera. Now, the Red Cinema camera was an amazing looking camera, not just from the quality, but from just the way the whole thing was designed. However, the price on a Red camera quickly turned me away from it. Now, I understand the Red cameras were known for having that high frame rate, having that super resolution, and having the option to shoot in RAW, which I didn't even know was possible at the time. So fast forward to 2019, and I've been shooting a lot on this guy. This is the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, and I absolutely love this camera because it gives me everything that I feel like I need right now. It gives me high resolution, it gives me high frame rates, and it also gives me RAW. All the things that initially got me super excited about the Red cameras, but at a very, very small fraction of the price, which has really had me asking myself recently, is it really worth it to buy a Red in 2019? What's good, creative fam? Brandon Washington here. And first of all, if you're brand new to the channel, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button because this channel is all about filmmaking gear, tips, and tutorials. But in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at two amazing cameras, and that is the Red Raven and the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. Now, I already can see you guys going away in the comments. Trust me, I understand that comparing these two cameras is absolutely insane. I mean, first of all, the Red Raven is a couple years old at this point, and it's also a $15,000 camera. Comparing it to something like this, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, that is only a couple months old, depending on when you actually got yours or not. And also, you know, this camera only is $1,400. So $15,000, $1,400. It's a pretty massive price difference, but because I've always wanted a Red and now that I'm shooting on the Blackmagic, I just thought this would be a fun, cool little experiment to do, and so I wanted to bring you guys along for the journey. So if you're into that, definitely go ahead and hit that thumbs up button and we'll jump into the content. If not, feel free to click off now. But, I mean, you're already here, so why not enjoy it, right? Trust me, it'll be worth it. Now look, Red is definitely industry standards. I understand all of the amazing movies and music videos and commercials that are shot on Red for numerous of reasons. I mean, first of all, Red just has that look. I mean, there is something to the Red color science that is absolutely amazing, which has made it industry standard. But don't sleep on DaVinci, because DaVinci is also industry standard, primarily more so for their actual software than their cameras, but their coloring software actually comes with this camera, so you're kind of stepping into industry no matter which camera you decide to go with. But let's stop babbling and let's start looking at these two cameras. And first, we're going to start off with ergonomics and design, because I personally know that yes, image quality is everything, but if this is a camera that you're going to be purchasing and you're going to be shooting with on a routine basis, you kind of have to enjoy shooting with the camera. I mean, I will say that shooting on the Red Raven is like, it's a dream. I mean, the fact that everything is all into this nice little box is perfect. I mean, there's no cables. Everything bolts directly to the actual brain itself. And it just makes shooting with this camera super, super easy. But I also know that rigging this camera up, if you were going to be using it on like a film, short film, commercial, music video, whatever, all of that is also doable. But even in its most stripped down sense, this camera is so easy. Now, you compare that to its smaller kind of cousin, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. And first of all, when the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera is stripped down, it is tiny. I mean, the size comparison is borderline laughable, but it's insane to think that both of these cameras are shooting so similar to one another when the size is so drastically different. But I will say, the nice thing about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera is the fact that everything you need is pretty much built into it. I mean, it's got all of its I/O ports. That's not an additional cost. It also has a screen built into the body of it, which is also not an additional cost. And it has a compartment to allow you to actually power the camera, which is also not an additional cost. As you guys can see with the Red Raven, all these additional little things that you basically need in order to film come at an additional cost. So where, yes, the Red Raven is probably a little bit nicer to actually film with, it also, you gotta pay for all those things in order to make it that nice to film with, because otherwise you could not film with it, which is one of the reasons why I like my Blackmagic, is because I actually am able to rig it out to be very similar to the Red Raven. I mean, I've got a handle on there, I've got V-mount batteries on there. It still has all the I/O ports that I need and I can actually work with. And then I can also throw a monitor on top of it if I wanted to be able to get a better screen or something that swivels like you have on the Red Raven. So it's optional as far as which one you prefer. Obviously, in this configuration, the Blackmagic now is actually a little bit heavier than the Red, but that can also be very beneficial when it comes to getting handheld shots. But for the most part, in both of these situations, we be shooting these things on tripods, so you're not even having to deal with that weight to begin with. So now let's jump into image quality. I got both of these cameras so I can actually see, what am I paying for? What is the difference in quality? And you'd be surprised, it's not much. So the very first test, we decided we would do a interview style setup. I will say though, however, I did something in this interview that I never do, and that was I did more of a high dynamic range test through my interview. So in this setup, I have the subject sitting down in the chair. We did use one light to light the subject, and then we set both cameras to the exact same exposure using the exact same settings, so that way we could see realistically how good each of these cameras did in reserving those highlights. And this is basically what it came down to. Having the window directly behind the subject basically allowed for a blown out background. And on the screen of both of these cameras, you could see that the window looked completely blown out. However, the Red did tend to hold on to more range. Now, we are shooting both of these cameras in RAW as well. So on the Blackmagic, I did use the highlight recovery tool in order to try to bring back some of those highlights. But you can easily see that I have lost all detail on the blinds. I mean, they're completely stark white, unlike on the Red Raven, where I still actually have some of that detail to play with. You know, dynamic range is a big selling feature for both of these cameras, and the Red Raven, I have to say, still reigns supreme, but not truly by much. But there is one area where these two cameras don't even come close, and that is in low light. The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera definitely has the edge when it comes to low light, and that has to do with its dual native ISO. Once you drop this thing down to 1250, it's basically like a brand new camera. It's sort of ridiculous. And the image was so clean coming out of this that we decided, what the heck, like, let's just do something crazy. Let's shoot a music video. But we don't have an artist, so we'll do it.
Sometimes I lose my mind, get a little ratchet. Just want cash or to get us hard. From that place where they move right bricks and the cops say hi with a damn nice stick. Broad daylight and we still hit licks. Rock 10 gold chains and you still ain't. Sip a little something, get a little lit. Just might go M. Night Shyamalan split.
I'm gonna just stick to directing. But in all seriousness, this test here was actually really, really cool because being able to have like the flashing light going off and kind of like adding in light to the scene kind of sporadically really allowed us to see like what the difference looked like in those different colors, as well as with the noise. This is actually one area where I pretty much expected the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera to outperform the Red, and that was because of that dual native ISO. This thing is a low light monster. You know, aside from the low light, looking at both of these cameras, they're just both so freaking good. You know, my experience in comparing these cameras was really enjoyable. I mean, getting a chance to shoot on the Red was amazing. I mean, like I mentioned at the very beginning, it just feels right. I mean, filming on the Red is an amazing camera. The aspect ratios that you get, the high frame rates, especially being able to shoot 4K at 120 frames per second. I mean, things like that were just amazing to have in a camera, which, to be fair, I don't have even today on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. And the fact that the Red RAW works directly within Final Cut made it super easy to actually edit this footage. I mean, I legitimately just imported the footage right into Final Cut, no proxies, no nothing, and I was able to edit the raw footage right in Final Cut. The workflow couldn't be simpler. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here in front. I mean, yes, it's also nice to be able to have, you know, that red camera in your hand, that professional look of having a red camera. But when you compare that to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, I mean, with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, you are getting value like nothing else. I mean, this camera is even more versatile. I mean, getting this thing on a gimbal is super easy. I tried to balance the red on the gimbal, and it wasn't the easiest thing to do. I mean, it was definitely possible, but it wasn't the easiest, especially when you have a big old V-mount battery on there, and then you also have to have the monitor on there. It didn't make it easy, but it was doable with this gimbal. And then, of course, with the Blackmagic, you're just getting astounding quality. I mean, it's hard to really compare these two cameras together because there are so many things that make them so different. But then there's also a lot of things that where they cross over, where they're basically almost the same. And it makes you really ask yourself that for literally about a tenth of the price, is it worth it to go from the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera to a Red Raven? And honestly, I have to say no. Now, yes, there are a lot of other great red cameras that will probably and do way outperform the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. But when you think about the value that you get for your money when it comes to this camera, and when you think about the fact that these two cameras can go toe-to-toe in a day like today, it really kind of drives home that point that that gap between prosumer, and consumer is getting way small, and the technology and the gear that is coming out today is making that possible. I mean, let's face it, good gear is having to become much cheaper, but cheap gear is getting really, really good. And that means that it's gonna come down to your creativity and what you can actually make. I mean, you can't just assume that you can go out and buy the biggest, baddest camera and that's gonna make you the best filmmaker on the market. It just doesn't work that way anymore, because someone who spends a tenth of the price will get close to the same quality as you, but if they're more creative and they can do more with the tool, well, that's what's gonna ultimately make them stand out. And in today's world, that's pretty much what seems to be happening. And so it all comes down to this final question, and that is, do I still want a red camera in 2019? I mean, if they're gonna give it to me, yeah.
Sometimes I lose my mind, get a little ratchet. Just want cash up to get us hard. From that place where they move right bricks and the cops say hi with a damn nice stick. Broad daylight and we still hit licks. Rock 10 gold chains and you still ain't. Sip a little something, get a little lit. Just might go M. Night Shyamalan split.